So I want to go back to two questions that came in earlier. The first one was from Matt Wyatt. Can we activate him, please, Scott? He asked about tube analysis.
Okay, sorry, I had to switch to my headphone there. So I think we have a good idea of general tube sampling, but I thought it'd be good if you could discuss what you mean by comprehensive tube sampling, what we're looking for when we take a HRSG tube sample and send it in. So.
Yeah, Matt, thanks very much. And the short answer is, I think you know, I think I've talked to you about it before, that you can go to the IAPS document on deposits in HP evaporators, but there's basically three things that we like to do. The first one is to make an understanding of the deposit loading, and there's a ASTM procedure for that. I can't remember the number, but it's in the IAPS document. The second step is to do a metallurgical examination of the indigenous oxide and any deposit, and then that indicates to us the morphology of those two important aspects, because the total loading is a combination of the indigenous oxide that goes on the tube plus the deposit. And the third part of the analysis that we like is to have SEM or mapping for elements. So you can map for the iron and any chromium, but most importantly, looking for any concentration reactions, because that the deposit map that I showed you, the green, yellow, and red, are defined by if there are any corrosion products, because when you get to a certain level of deposits, then you'll start to have some reaction product, and that's what we want to try and avoid, so that we can avoid under deposit corrosion. So that's what we define as having a comprehensive tube analysis of the HP evaporator tubes. We also use that for other tubes as well. Okay. So the second question, second comment was from Charles Turner. Is Charles still here?
Yes. Good afternoon. Just a quick question regarding on your very first slide, Barry, you saw about red in the HP drum. When I go into triple pressure HRSGs, generally start from the LP, move to the IP-HP. And what I notice and what clients have also discussed is the fact that rugged red tends to reduce or diminish from the LP to the HP, to the point where the HP is a dull red with undertones of black, magnetite. So the hematite does change. According to EPRI, they've verbally responded that that's due to the formation of the hematite under different saturation temperature conditions. Is that an accurate representation of the color change?
The reason is is that there is no problem with that variation in color, and that's basically because how and at what temperature the ferric oxide hydride forms. So when you have the LP in an LP system, the temperature is low enough that that oxide is going to form in situ. Whereas when you are talking about an HP evaporator, the temperature is too high for the ferric oxide to form in situ, and any redness there is due to transport from the lower pressure circuits. And it basically the same as for the science for the formation of ferric oxide hydrate. Above about 300 degrees, it won't form in situ. And so that's why we can move to AVTO and oxygenated treatment, because it changes what's happened in the feed water, because the feed water temperatures are generally less than 300 degrees. So that's the reason that you see a variation, because the red oxide that you see forms it performs in a different way and for the different as a function of the temperature.
Correct. Okay. And that's why when I do wipes and wiping down of the drums, I'll see that variation because it's,
you'll see it. There's not a quantitative difference, but if you do it in the HP drum, it'll come off very easy, and that's why you get coated in red. It'll also come off in the LP system, but in the LP system, that redness is formed in situ. Thank you.
very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And then there was a question from Lester Stanley. If he's still here, please.
Hi, Barry. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
When I inspect HP drums, sometimes they have multiple steam pipes leaving the drum, and then I only find one sensing line or sampling line going off to some remote sample spot. And I worry that we might miss a problem if the HP drum has a problem on the left end and the sample point's off on the far right end, 40 feet or 30 feet away. Has that ever happened, or do you see problems with that?
Yes, it was recognized when we developed the carryover document, and actually your question is as if you've just read it out of the IAPS document, because that's exactly what was recognized, is that there's sometimes 6 offtakes, and quite often plants only monitor one of them. So there are really 2 aspects. The first one is that we're most worried about the equipment downstream of the drum going to the steam turbine, and so as long as that carryover is monitored once every 6 months to see that there isn't any major problem, and if there's a major problem, you would easily see it in that one sample. But the way that we usually suggested is that each one of those offtakes has a sample line, and when the manufacturers of the drums or the manufacturers of the HRSGs are supposed by contract to measure the carryover initially during the commissioning, and then it's suggested that each one of those lines has a sample, and you would rotate them round to see during the commissioning. And then to cover the point that you're mentioning, you could actually have them switched if you want to. I agree that it doesn't happen very often, and we generally just see that one line being monitored, Lester.
The reason I'm kind of bringing it up is some of these older HRSGs, we're seeing a lot of cracking in belly pans and some kind of weak mechanical conditions. So I worry that if it was fine for the first 15 years, it may not be that great of a practice for the next 15 of these aging HRSGs.
Exactly, and that's the background to the overall technology that we're trying to get addressed. Quite often we see this major carryover in brand new units that come online and can be addressed following the commissioning, but and it's why we suggest every 6 months to see if there's any change. Even if there's a small change, you would hopefully catch it in that one common offtake. Lester, we can't force the industry or the manufacturers to monitor or to have sampling locations for each one of these offtakes. All we can do is provide the background. Good point. It's a good point. Thank you. There was a question from Andy W. I'm sorry, I don't know what his last name is. Is he still here?
Yeah, I'm here. It's Andy Whitney. Do you hear me?
Yeah, Andy. Yeah, thank you.
You know me from IAPS, Barry.
Yes, I do, but I didn't know who the W was.
Yeah. So my question is for all of you. what can OEMs do to help the HRSG chemistry community? Do you have a wish list of things that OEMs could do to make it all better for us?
Yeah. Well, you're an OEM, and
What do you want from me?
well, we try all the time. Anybody, Bob can answer this, or any of the others. We've tried over the 20 years to introduce things. The main, I would say, the main activity over the last 20 years, Andy, has been to try to address FAC and to get everybody to understand the background for that, and how you can essentially design that out. I think that's a very successful story now, and we still see some new HRSGs coming online without that ruggedness, but that's a good example. Maybe Bob has another example.
Well, I don't have a chemistry one, but there is a long list, Andy. But
Yeah.
I'd say that the main thing is the topics or the issues that need addressing or would help to address are those that come up in these presentations and these discussions. We could actually, this 2019 article that Barry footnoted at the beginning of his presentation gives the laundry list and prioritizes it based on where the majority of the problems are. So that would be a good place to start looking.
Yes. And Ken and Kirk, we try all the time to get the right sample points for iron. We try to get the right sample points to have the instrumentation. We've published extensively the minimum level, but we still find, particularly for you, Andy, which must be horrible, is to find that some of these units don't have steam monitoring. Not only don't have steam monitoring, don't have steam sampling points. And so, yeah. I mean, I think that's being published. We've, many organizations have published that instrumentation list that Kirk showed, and similarly for the corrosion products, Ken, right? Is Ken still here?
All right, thank you. This is super interesting, and I'll keep attending all of these whenever I can.
Yeah, Andy, I did think of. I thought of one thing, important thing you can do, and it'll save you money, not cost you money, if you will, for a boiler that's going into an all-ferrous system. If you will refuse to install an oxygen scavenger injection port anywhere on it, you'll be doing FAC a great favor.
That's a good one.
Yeah, Bob, thank you. And Andy, we received a lot of questions from around the world. We probably today have people from all the continents in the world, and many people. And if we look down those questions, you'll see there's quite a number of them asking about how to optimize oxygen scavenger. Never mind, should we have it? And so even now, 30 years later, there's a situation where we have the original specification, and the manufacturers are putting in requirements for the wrong chemicals. Ken, did you have something to say?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to talk and it doesn't work that way. No, I was just going to say, I agree with Barry. Probably the biggest thing that anyone can do to help all of us is make sure there's opportunities for doing sampling and doing it properly. Because as I said in my presentation, we're assuming that there's sample points, that everything's been taken into account, whether it's going to be the right kind of sampling nozzles, or whether it's isokinetic or not, or all those kind of things. We assume that's going to be done before we can even start doing any kind of analysis. So that's critical. short of making everything out of a chromium mix, you know. So, but then that would put a lot of us out of business. So
That would put us out of business too.
Yes.
No one can
Well,
buy that.
Thanks, thanks, Ken. There's two more questions here. As long as Bob and Scott let us go, keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
And
Yeah, I
so
just checked. They're both still on.
So we have Pete
Pete?
Pete LePage, please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. How you doing?
Good.
So I had a question for my plant chemistry group. We have one HRSG drum. We have 8 HRSGs here in operation right now. One of them, the HP drum conductivity is showing high comparing to the other HRSGs. You know, all the other chemistry is normal. You know, LP drum, CVD rate more than other HRSGs on this unit.
Okay. So with Kirk, Kirk, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the maybe the first thing, maybe the easiest thing would be, have you eliminated an instrumentation error at that location? I mean, you have a spare connectivity sensor you can swap in there, and does it give you the same results? Has that sensor been calibrated lately? Have you confirmed that it's configured correctly with the right cell constant? You know, little things like that can obviously make a difference. And if you're seeing good results or better results at other locations, then you want to eliminate that as a risk area first.
We change that sensor, and the new sensor is showing the same result.
Okay. Can you? I mean, can you give me a range? I mean, what is the connectivity, and what is it relative to the other kind of sister and brother sensors in similar locations?
Yeah, the conductivity limit, this is cation conductivity, and the limit it's 3 microsiemens. And now we are opening the CVD too much, so we are controlling below 3. The sister HRSGs with less CVD, and its cation conductivity is 0.2, 0.1.
Yeah, that's a pretty big delta. Oh, Barry, you're on mute.
I think that we could do it. Pete, why don't you send us to me and Kirk, and we'll have a look at the data. There's another question from.
We will do that.
Okay, thank you. You have our email, or send it to Scott. So we have another question from Donna Lee. Donna? Okay, is Donna with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So on one of our HRSG units, we have a lot of corrosion going on, and we wanted to add oxygen to increase the oxygen level downstream of the LP drum because we have corrosion there. But how can we get rid of corrosion in the LP drum itself without increasing pH? Because we're at the highest end of pH we can right now based on our discharge. We run about our limits are 9.2 to 9.8 for the LP drum, and we run between 9.6 and 9.8. And I don't want to try a film forming amine, so we can't do pH. So I'm thinking oxygen. Is there any way we can add oxygen to the feed forward LP drum?
Oh, so Donna, I think we have to separate the answer here, because it's very dangerous to try to solve problems at arm's length like this, because we don't know what the corrosion is. So if the corrosion is considered to be FAC, then we would have to identify whether it was single phase or two phase, and then we can address each of those. If it is something else, and you're just looking at the question of can you add oxygen to the low pressure system, the answer is yes, and we do that very often. But I have to be very careful in the answer because we don't know exactly what your problem is, and so typically we would measure the iron in the low pressure, and if the iron levels maybe in the feed water and the drums are higher than the levels that I showed you earlier, then there are a number of ways in which you can do that. First of all, if it's something that would benefit from oxygen, like a single phase FAC, then the first situation that is usually conducted is to close the vent on the deaerator and let the oxygen from the condensate come into the cycle. And if that isn't satisfactory, you can add oxygen to that system. There are in fact very few HRSGs that operate on what we would call oxygenated treatment. So I have to be very careful here in answering you. If you want to send us some extra information about the corrosion and whether that's been identified, then we could perhaps take it a little bit further. But otherwise, it's a little bit dangerous to deal with these things at arm's length.
Okay, yeah, we don't have a deaerator on this system, so everything's kind of already closed, and we have less than 1 pp of oxygen. So, and we have it's more hematite than magnetite, and it was off the charts on the using the B&W. So,
the important thing here in the discussion is what the corrosion is. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, Donna, the only thing I was going to ask is what you just shared is you're currently running at 1 ppb or below oxygen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it goes out with the LP drum since it's feed forward, you know, and we don't have a deaerator, as you say.
Yes. Yeah, so it's not unusual, but I emphasize again for the third time, we would need to know what that corrosion is before before you did anything. You wouldn't want to just add oxygen. You know, it could be some other type of corrosion than FAC, for instance.
Okay.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there was one other question from Bob, if it's okay, from Tham Chelvan. I think he just wanted to make a comment about different limit values around the world. Tham, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. I was going through one of the plant data, and they are following two different guidelines. One is from VGB, another one is the EPRI. But VGB guidelines are very strict. Like, for example, cation conductivity, they limit for up to pressure, like say 40 bar, 580 PSIA. They limit to like 5 microsiemens per centimeter, whereas the EPRI guideline allows up to 25 microsiemens per centimeter. My question is, why such a big difference between these two guidelines? And one of the reasons I was told is, well, maybe, you know, EPRI in the US, when the boiler manufacturers, OEMs design the tubes, they allow corrosion allowance and a whole lot of other allowances. So they tend to have the thicker section of the tube for meeting the ASME minimum wall thickness as well as other margins. Whereas in the European OEMs, they don't allow such a extra margins like corrosion allowance or whatever other allowances.
Yeah.
So my question is, why such a significant difference, 5 versus 25? If it is like, 5, 7, whatever, then I understand. But EPRI has 25, VGB has 5 for drum LP IP drums up to like 40 bar. And then as the pressure goes up, the value goes down. So that's my question. Does anyone know why such a vast difference?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I don't think that we can go through that now. It would require me to look at it, and I don't have anything to do with either of those guidelines, although I did in the past have something to do with the EPRI ones. But so I don't think we can answer that unless anybody else wants to have a.
Because the reason for that question is the plant was the OEM is from European country like Germany, for example, Siemens, and the plant is located in the USA. The general guideline is if your plant is located in USA, follow the EPRI guideline. But in this case, because the plant is designed by a German company, they insist to use the VGB guideline number, and so the plant guys are questioning. The EPRI says 25, and the OEM says 5. Which one I should follow? I said to them, follow the VGB, the minimum value, as if you can achieve it. If you cannot achieve it, if you exceed a little bit more than 5, then follow the EPRI guideline as a second tier of limit. That's the answer I gave. But I was trying to understand why such a wide variation. Yeah.
Yeah, Sam, Bob and I get those things all the time. When you do assessments all over the world, you get different sets of guidelines. So then we try to indicate to the plant, which is I think what you should do, what that chemistry should be based on the equipment and the materials that are in that specific plant. And that's usually how we do it. So if you want to send me something, I can have a look at it, but I don't usually make comparisons between different sets of guidelines. It's much more important to get the chemistry optimized for that particular plant.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob, I don't think I have any more questions here. And I've been looking at the questions that we had beforehand. I think most of them Kirk and Ken have dealt with them, I think.
One more thing, can I make a comment on that question from Donna Lee about this corrosion issue? One unit, they followed the chemistry to whatever the recommended range. For example, the pH 9.4 to 9.8, and the oxygen was almost same level as she had, like one kind of whatever the unit it is. But there was erosion force present, even though they followed the chemistry properly. There was items which contributed for erosion. For example, they have a belly plate with distribution holes, and they have bolts anchoring, tightening those. The riser water, because that plate became loose with those bolts unscrewed, the water was going sideways instead of going through those perforated holes. And that sideway impinging onto the surface and creating some, erosive force. And also this chemistry combined created the flow accelerated corrosion, single phase. So maybe she should check any loose items for water to impinge on those locations for FAC.
Yeah, and usually, Tam, usually at those locations, it would be two-phase FAC, not single phase. So that's why I'm always a little concerned about providing definitive advice and guidance when we don't know what the complete situation is. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Bob, I think I just hand it back to you. Thank you.
I see I was muted. No wonder I wasn't getting any respect. Well, let me thank our presenters for an excellent group of presentations, and let me thank the participants. There were over 200 of you at the High Point. I think that's a record so far for us. So let me thank everyone. Sorry we went over a little bit, but I think the information was worthwhile. So I look forward to seeing your names all on the participant list again next month. We'll be announcing the subject matter and presenters here before too long.